Big news was announced today. What's going on, guys? It's Ricky with TechBot Solutions. Hope that you guys are all having an amazing Tuesday. Just a very quick market update. So the question that a lot of people are asking is like, what sparked this V-shaped reversal? Not just with the market, because markets were kind of down, but definitely not as bearish as crypto. But with what we saw in the past 48 hours, we've been seeing higher highs and higher lows. Direction is incredibly bullish. I want to acknowledge that, especially with crypto. But what changed? First thing that I want to share with you guys that is and can be bullish news. Federal Reserve officially ends quantitative tightening. As many of you guys know, the Federal Reserve has two specific mandates: price stability and, of course, a strong labor market. As many of you guys know, all the red flags have been present of a weakening labor market. Some people kind of suggest that it's all because of AI. The Federal Reserve has made it very clear that, them cutting rates isn't going to fix that labor market issue. But by cutting rates also, they're kind of in a pickle. Cutting rates is inflationary, which is why they've been kind of cautious about aggressively cutting rates, because although they think that it can maybe help the weak labor market, they know that it can also fuel the fire of the rising inflation. I mean, a lot of us wouldn't know right now that inflation is rising, especially when the CPI data reports are not being released. Nonetheless, a lot of investors are expecting that the next step after the Federal Reserve officially ends quantitative tightening is, turn on the money printers, right? That is the assumption that is being made right now. And I'm not here to say that that's a wrong assumption, because looking back from 2019 to 2020, it kind of makes sense. The Federal Reserve obviously sees, some smoke, and they want to make sure that if they need to, that they are in a favorable position to save the economy if it comes to that point, which that's where quantitative easing comes in, which again, normally does fuel the market and can allow especially speculative markets like crypto to perform better. Now, this is not confirmed. It's not that, the Federal Reserve started or stopped quantitative tightening, now they're going to start quantitative easing, like on the 3rd, right? It doesn't work that way. But I wanted to make sure that you were aware that, yes, it is good news. The Fed has ended quantitative tightening after running it for 3+ years. The next logical stop is quantitative easing. A lot of people are posting this on X, and it's true. But there's one thing that most people don't understand. A quantitative easing doesn't happen until there are big cracks in the economy. So if quantitative easing happens, there will be a major crash first. It could happen or be short-lived, like in March of 2020, or it could be like the 2008 financial crisis, obviously hinting on something maybe a little bit bigger. If you've survived this crash, then you will enjoy one of the biggest rallies of your lifetime. And don't think of a new bull run, don't think of a new bull run happening next week or in a month. I think the biggest thing out of all of this is that people are excited about the market. The Fed has finally stopped quantitative tightening, which tends to be a way to allow the markets to breathe. And it does open the door for quantitative easing. Remember, I still think markets are overbought, but I want to make sure that I highlight the bull case. And that is that if they do begin to try to save the market and pump markets even higher, then why not talk about it if it's a possibility, right? With that being said, that's the thing that I really wanted to highlight out of this post, is that they would only begin to start the idea of quantitative easing if there are cracks in the current economy that we have today. And I feel like most of us can kind of see the red flags, right? We have huge credit card debt, we have a very weak labor market, and we have rising inflation. And overall, although the economy seems to be running just fine, especially the stock market nearly at all-time highs, we know that there's a big disconnect between those that are doing well and I would say the lower class that are kind of struggling right now. And because of that, I think it's important to note that if you do decide to invest in anything, you're an adult, you can invest in anything that you want. Let me make this clear. I'm not a big supporter of Bitcoin, but if you like Bitcoin, I say buy Bitcoin itself. And even this, MSTR. I made a video about it today that I was shorting it, and it worked out very well. If you're part of my LPP team, I talked about adding more to my short as an overbought reversal formed when it was at highs of 187. I originally opened right around 184 and then added more right around 187. And as it sold off into the close, I did my part in taking profits. Again, I trade live with them every morning. If you ever want to watch me trade live, as soon as the market opens, it's the second link in the description down below if you want a huge discount. But with that being said, I'm not a big supporter of MicroStrategy. I think it's an absolute trash company. It's down 55% in the past 3 months. I think it's literally one of the worst publicly traded companies out there. But if you think that this next step of the Fed is going to cause crypto to boom, then you are correct. In that sense that if you believe the crypto market is going to boom because you think that they're just going to begin to start quantitative easing, then at that point, if Bitcoin begins to thrive, MicroStrategy will also be given the environment to thrive as well. Because MicroStrategy, although it is a software company, it doesn't really make any money with its software. It actually loses money. Its main coin is Bitcoin, right? And that's what it buys. So if Bitcoin begins to go up, so can MicroStrategy. Ricky, why would you be saying this if you're bearish on MicroStrategy? Because I don't care about talking about both sides. And that's the thing that I think people get confused is that I want to encourage you to do whatever it is that you think is best. And if you see there to be upside potential, I really do not believe that, you're going to be against me in the sense of just because a few people choose to buy MicroStrategy, it's going to completely throw my idea or opinion away of MSTR. My opinion about MSTR will always stay the same. I don't believe in Michael Saylor. I don't understand the value behind investing in a company like MicroStrategy. But at the end of the day, it's a public market and you have every right to invest in companies that you see value in, regardless if I agree or not, right? That being said, if we see more selling pressure and they don't resume to quantitative easing right away, I want to remind you, the markets pushed up today because of the idea that they were going to start quantitative easing. If anything is hinted on that, hey, this is not going to happen anytime soon, then don't be surprised if markets begin to correct, especially in the crypto space. Because remember, the crypto space is more often, just like the stock market, a leading indicator. It likes to factor things in advance before they actually happen, and especially high risk assets like Bitcoin. They're speculative assets. And the thing that I thought was quite interesting is I also wanted to share some more good news about a potential shift. A regime change looms at the Fed. One candidate emerges as front runner for chair. As many of you guys have heard, the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, is supposed to fulfill his term, if I'm not mistaken, around March of 2026. And according to Trump and his sources, they have a candidate already selected. Most likely, Trump is going to appoint someone that is in favor of his policies, which is crypto, and his whole family is invested in crypto. So it makes sense on why he would want to put someone that is pro cutting interest rates and pro crypto. So I wouldn't be very surprised that if he does get appointed, the assumption that it will be good for crypto and good for the market, just like when Trump got elected, markets began to, or not elected, when he was viewed as the president-elect, when he won the race but didn't officially go into office, markets skyrocketed just based off of the idea of him going into term and him being pro-business. I would assume the same thing could happen for something like this. And again, I like talking about this because I don't want us to be surprised. Although I think that markets are overbought and I think that they should correct themselves, who cares about my opinion on that when I need to make sure that I respect the news? And if I choose to ignore this, then at that point, I'm just working against the market and not with it, right? I can have an opinion, but I shouldn't allow my opinions to cloud my way of thinking when it comes down to the trade decisions that I choose to make on a daily basis, right? So I wanted to make sure that I shared the news that although he hasn't officially said, it is assumed that the individual that he's going to be selecting is director or the National Economic Council director, Kevin Hassett, has been dubbed the clear favorite for the next Fed chair position. The last thing that I wanted to show you very quickly is there's an individual that commented in my previous video when I talked about MicroStrategy and the idea that, hey, if they continue to sell off and trade below their 1 MNAV multiple, they could be forced to sell Bitcoin due to their obligations of their dividends and their interest payments. And he said that that is not true. That is false. I want to share with you a video from the strategy, which is MicroStrategy's CEO, if I'm not mistaken, directly saying just that.
If there is literally a 3-year sustained Bitcoin down cycle, a 3-year sustained cycle where MNAV trades below 1x, then we may have to sell Bitcoin. At this point in time, it's the end of 2025. We're talking about 2029 where that may be the case. And we have the Bitcoin for a reason, to protect the company, to protect our shareholders. And if we have to sell, we...
And again, very simple. The story that started with, no, we will never sell our Bitcoin, buy more, is now coming to a point to say, hey, well, now we'll sell if we have to. And I just want to remind you that, again, it can call itself a Bitcoin treasury. It could identify as a Bitcoin treasury. But guess what? It's not a Bitcoin treasury. No one cares what it identifies at. It's a software company, and it has an obligation to investors to pay the dividends that was promised and the interest payments that are owed. And if, for some reason, I'm just saying, if markets continue to remain uncertain and those red flags continue to present itself and Bitcoin continues to sell off, pushing the MNAV even lower for MSTR, do not be surprised that if MSTR begins to sell, imagine the panic that will sink in the crypto market. I want to remind you that MSTR is down 55%. While the markets are bullish. How much do you think that it will crash once markets turn bearish? If they do. And again, it's still a big if, right? In the very early stages of it, markets can have another leg up. That would be of a bullish case for MicroStrategy. But if markets go lower, you cannot be surprised if things can get very bad, not just for Bitcoin, but for MicroStrategy itself. To me, it's the whole FTX scandal all over again from the year 2000, or if you were here before, the whole BitConnect scandal all over again. There's always one specific institution that really paves the way of hey, this was another just bullshit company that discredited the crypto space even more. And there's a reason that crypto has such an infested just connotation towards it. And it's because of what consists and the investors that partake in it. That's at least been my take. Like I've said, I've never been of support of crypto. I think that it's infested by a bunch of people that feel like they deserve everything, but truly earn nothing, right? First, it started with NFTs, and now we have all these different coins that people continue to make with speculative value and made up utility. So I'm excited to learn more, to see how the markets transition out of this quantitative tightening with literally everything you could ask for. A president that's incredibly bullish, with now the Fed being positioned and the head of the Fed being positioned to be in favor for crypto. We'll see. With all the stars aligned, can crypto still make it happen, or will it all just end up turning into a big flame? So very excited to follow up, excited to learn more, and excited to talk more about this. If MicroStrategy overnight, if Bitcoin begins to retrace, it could set up a really nice short, but we'll talk about that a little bit more for tomorrow's live trading session right at Market Open. Again, whenever you're ready to tune on in, second link in the description down below. We'll be live at Market Open for our live session. Like always, let's make sure that we end the year on a green note. Take care, team.